They came at dawn with badges and a lie. 5 HOA officers marched onto my Texas ranch, shouting orders to seize my land. But they didn't know about the marine-grade surveillance hidden in the barn or the $7 million water vein buried beneath their feet. By sundown, their evidence boxes would burn, their lies would go viral, and I'd hold proof they'd kill to destroy. This is how I turned their ambush into a war they couldn't win. I stood at the edge of my porch, shotgun in one hand, phone recording in the other, while 5 HOA officers marched across my open ranch field like they owned it. Their shiny badges glinted under the hot Texas sun, and behind them came a rental truck with boxes marked evidence. I watched in disbelief as one of them shouted, "We're seizing this property under HOA violation codes." Then, without a word of permission, they began taping HOA enforcement signs across my barn and gate. But what they didn't know was I had been ready for this. I had copies of every document, every deed, every inch of my ranch's legal standing, filed in a safe and backed up digitally. They thought they could walk onto my land and take it. They were about to learn what it meant to mess with a veteran who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. That's when I stepped down from the porch and yelled, "You touch one more fence post, and I'll have you all on the front page of tomorrow's paper." They paused, some startled, but the tall man in the front, one in sunglasses with a smug grin, laughed and pointed his clipboard at me. "You think we're bluffing?" I smiled coldly. "You just gave me everything I need." But before I could say another word, a loud crash echoed from the barn and one of them yelled, "He's got surveillance footage running in there." They rushed toward it, ripping open the doors. And that's when things really exploded, literally. Now, let me tell you how it all started. It began 3 months ago when I finally decided to settle down after years of serving in the Marines. 20 years of IEDs couldn't break me, but an HOA's smile? That's a new kind of enemy. I bought this piece of land just outside the small town of Cypress Ridge, Texas. It was a beautiful ranch, wide green fields, a peaceful creek running through it, and a red barn that needed bit of fixing. But it was mine. I didn't just buy a house. I bought freedom. I'm Jack Lawson, 48 years old, single, and tired of noise. I chose the spot because it sat outside the HOA boundaries. That's right, no HOA. I made sure of that before I bought it. I even had the county records printed and notarized. I didn't want someone telling me what color my barn should be or how long grass could grow. I'd had enough orders for a lifetime. Everything was peaceful for the first few weeks. I got a couple of cows, set up a chicken coop, and fixed the fencing. My neighbors were friendly, especially old Mr. Tucker down the road, who brought me homemade jerky and stories about how the land used to be cattle territory. Then came the 8OA from the next subdivision over. It started small. A knock on the door from a woman in a beige suit who introduced herself as Karen Whitmore, president of the Oak Hollow HOA. She smiled wide, too wide. "We've noticed you've done a few unpermitted improvements, and we'd love to help you bring the ranch up to community code." I blinked. "I'm not part of your community." She chuckled like I was a child. "Oh, I understand the confusion, but we've recently expanded our reach. Some of these rural areas fall under our guidance now." "No, ma'am. This ranch is outside your reach." I closed the door gently, or so I thought, because the next morning I found a yellow notice on my gate. HOA violation, unapproved agricultural use. I tore it off and threw it in the trash. Then more followed. Fines, notices, emails, all claiming I was in noncompliance. At first, I ignored them. But one morning, I woke up and found 2 men walking across my property with clipboards taking photos of my barn. I stormed out and told them to leave. They did, but not before saying, "You'll regret not cooperating with Oak Hollow." That's when I knew this wasn't some mix-up. These people weren't confused. They were trying to take my land. I filed a report with the sheriff, but he just shook his head. "HAs can be nasty," he said. Little did I know nasty meant arson, bribes, and a federal warrant with my face on it. But unless they trespass or damage anything, there ain't much I can do. It's all paperwork war. So I got ready for battle. I hired a land attorney, paid for drone footage, and even got a land surveyor to mark my boundaries with metal pins. Then I installed cameras all hidden around the ranch, in the barn, trees, even along the fence line. Still, they kept coming. Karen returned a week later with two board members and tried to inspect my shed. I told them they were trespassing. She said I was creating tension in the community. Community? Lady, I have cows. That's my community. Then came the bribe. One night, I found an envelope slid under my door. It had $1,000 in cash and a note. Join Oak Hollow. Let us handle your land. You'll have less stress. Signed here. I burned it in my fire pit. But then 2 nights later, I heard noises by the gate. I rushed out with my flashlight and saw three figures jumping into a car and speeding off. They had tried to cut my fence, and one of my cameras caught it all. I sent the footage to my lawyer. His email came back the next morning. They're getting bold. Be ready. Now, here's the twist. Just when I thought I was dealing with just HOA bullies, I found out something bigger. My ranch sat on an underground water vein, one that stretched across Oak Hollow and into farmland nearby. And guess who had a development deal in place to sell luxury condos? Oak Hollow HOA. And guess who needed my land to connect it all? Yep, me. They were trying to push me out by faking violations, hoping I'd either give up or fold under pressure. But I wasn't raised to run. So I prepared. I filed a cease and desist. I gave a copy to the sheriff. I warned Karen and the board on camera that any more visits would be considered harassment and trespassing, but they didn't stop. And now here they were marching across my land like some backwoods SWAT team, carrying fake documents and bad attitudes, trying to take my barn, claiming they were confiscating property for investigation. That's when the camera in the barn caught them live and the motion sensor set off the diversion trap I had wired. I didn't want to hurt anyone, but I did want to scare the truth out of them. Smoke burst from behind the hay bales. A loud horn sounded. Red lights blinked. The officers screamed, stumbling out of the barn. One of them dropped their clipboard. Another tripped over a chicken feeder. They ran. Yes, ran straight off my property. But the chaos had just begun because as they fled, they left behind something they didn't mean to. A folder. A folder marked Confidential, Project Longbridge. And inside blueprints, contracts, and my name at the very top of a list marked Remove Property Owners by any means necessary. The smoke cleared, and that's when I saw it, a folder labeled Project Longbridge with my name underlined in red. But the real shock? The signature at the bottom belonged to the county commissioner. What did that mean? What were they planning next? And how deep did this go? I had just opened a war they thought I couldn't win. But now I had proof, and I was done playing nice. Where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know how far this HOA madness is reaching. Are you ready for what happens next? Because this is just the beginning. I stared at the folder in my hand, heartbeat pounding in my ears. The words, remove property owners by any means necessary, echoed louder than the blaring alarm that had just chased those HOA officers off my land. I flipped through the pages, page after page of plotted maps, highlighted zones, legal jargon, and emails that looked like they'd been printed off private servers. Right there in bold text was the name of the development project, Project Longbridge. The paper said it was a community revitalization effort backed by big real estate investors and run through Oak Hollow HOA as a front. But I knew what that really meant. Land grab. This wasn't just about me having cows and refusing to join the HOA. No, this was about them needing my land to finish connecting their water access route to the bigger deal they'd struck with out-of-town builders. And it wasn't just my land marked. There were 5 other ranches on the list. Some had already been crossed out in red ink. Mine was the only one still boxed in yellow. I wasn't just an obstacle. I was the last piece of the puzzle, a red X over my ranch. But the coordinates scribbled in the corner, they matched a site 20 miles west, where Oak Hollow's community park was really a pipeline. I rushed inside my house, locked the doors, and called my lawyer, Dennis. He was a rough around the edges kind of guy with a smart mouth and sharp brain. I'd picked him because he once beat a city's zoning board at their own game. If anyone could help now, it was Dennis. I read him parts of the folder. He paused, then said, Jack, you're not just in a land dispute. You're in the middle of organized fraud. These HOA folks are stepping into criminal territory now. I want to take them down, I said. For good? Then you better prepare for a storm because they won't go down quietly. Dennis helped me draft a report to the local district attorney. We filed a restraining order against the HOA. We attached surveillance footage, the blueprint plans, and even screenshots of emails found in the folder. I thought maybe now they'd back off, but I was wrong. 2 nights later, while I was resting in my recliner with my dog, Ruger, snoring at my feet, the power went out. Not just a flicker, complete darkness. Then the security cameras cut out. I sat up fast, grabbed my flashlight, and checked the fuse box. All switches were flipped correctly. That's when I heard it. A quiet snap from the edge of the fence line. I grabbed my shotgun and stepped outside with Ruger beside me. Moonlit just enough of the path for me to make out 3 figures crouched behind my barn. One of them held what looked like a canister. Another had wire cutters. Stop right there. I shouted. They jumped, scattered like scared cats, and ran for a black SUV parked just beyond the trees. I fired one shot in the air just to let them know I was serious. Ruger barked loud enough to wake the whole county. I didn't chase them. I had what I needed. My second set of backup cameras hidden in the trees caught everything. Dennis came by the next morning with a USB drive. I gave the DA your full report, he said. But we've got a problem. One of the board members is friends with the sheriff's brother. We can't trust this to stay local. So we take it federal? I said, exactly. Dennis reached out to a contact in the FBI's Real Estate Crimes Unit. It would take time, but he said if we could catch the HOA in one more illegal act, just one, we'd have enough for a full investigation. So I set the bait. That same day, I put up a for sale sign at the edge of my ranch, but made it look like a fake one. The idea was simple. If Oak Hollow thought I was desperate enough to sell, they'd make their next move. And that's exactly what happened. Within 24 hours, Karen Whitmore herself showed up again. This time, she wasn't smiling. You can't sell this land, she barked, not even trying to hide her anger. I thought you wanted me gone, I said casually. Not to just anyone, she snapped. This land is part of our community plan now. Funny, I don't remember signing up. Her face turned red. Let me make this simple. If you don't take our offer, we'll make life on this ranch very difficult for you. She didn't just want my land, she needed it. Rumor was her brother owed $2 million to the developers, and my ranch was his collateral. She handed me a folded sheet of paper and stormed off in her SUV. I opened it. It was a fake court document, completely forged, claiming that my ranch had been declared a nuisance property and would be subject to inspection, penalty, and seizure. That was the final nail in their coffin. I scanned the document, added it to the file, and sent everything to Dennis. The next call we made was to the FBI. Meanwhile, I decided to strike back, not just legally, but publicly. I started filming TikToks and YouTube videos exposing what had been happening. I told my story in short parts, showed footage, posted clips of Karen trespassing, of the fake officers storming the barn, and of the plans in the Project Longbridge folder. The videos exploded overnight. People started commenting from everywhere, California, New York, Ohio, saying how their own HOAs were doing similar things. Turns out, 300K people had HOAs worse than mine. One comment hit hard. They foreclosed on my mom's hospice house. Make them pay. So I did. Some even recognized Karen from other schemes she'd been involved in. It turned out she had a long record of bullying property owners. Some had lost their homes. But I wasn't going to be one of them. That's when I got a visit from someone unexpected. A man in his early 50s dressed in plain clothes showed up in a silver truck with government plates. He introduced himself as Agent Mendes from the FBI's White Collar Crimes Unit. "We've been monitoring Oak Hollow," he said. "Your evidence confirms what we suspected, but we need one last thing to nail them." "What's that?" "We need to catch them trying to force a sale or perform an illegal seizure on camera, and it has to be this week before their development deal closes." I nodded slowly. "I've got just the plan." So I set a trap. I scheduled a fake sale meeting on the ranch and invited Karen and two of her top board members to come finalize the transfer. I even hinted that I might finally cave in. They took the bait like fish to worms. I wore a hidden camera on my shirt. Agent Mendes was nearby with backup. Dennis sat in my truck with a zoom lens on his camera. Karen walked onto my land, confident and smug. But what she didn't know was she was walking straight into her own downfall. Because this time, I wasn't going to wait for help. This time, I was ready to crush their entire plan. But just when I thought I had everything under control, one of the board members opened the trunk of their SUV and pulled out a bag of something heavy. I stepped closer. Then I saw it. Inside the bag were bolt cutters and a set of chains. What were they planning to do with that? Was this more than just intimidation? Were they planning to chain up my barn or block me from entering my own home? I didn't wait to find out. I stepped forward and said, "Smile. You're on camera." And Karen's face turned white. But then the guy with the bag lunged at me. And that's when all hell broke loose. The man lunged fast like he had done this before. This wasn't the first time he tried to scare someone off their own land. He swung the bag of chains at me, but I stepped back just in time. The metal links whooshed past my face, barely missing my jaw. I didn't hesitate. I dropped my phone, still recording, and drove my fist straight into his chest. He stumbled back, tripping over a patch of uneven dirt, and landed hard on his back. Chains spilled across the ground with a loud clatter. "You just assaulted me on my own land," I shouted. I turned to the second board member, an older man in a gray vest with a trembling lip. He looked unsure. His eyes darted to Karen, then to me, then the barn. That's when Agent Mendes and two FBI officers emerged from behind the hay bales. "Federal agents," Mendes shouted. "Put your hands where we can see them." Karen froze. The man on the ground tried to scramble to his feet, but one of the agents had him in cuffs in seconds. The older man raised his hands and backed away, looking like he'd just realized how deep he was in. Karen tried to play it cool. "I don't understand. This is all a misunderstanding. We were just following protocol. This is all part of HOA zoning." "Ma'am," Mendes said firmly, "we have you on camera issuing threats, presenting fake legal documents, trespassing, and orchestrating illegal attempts to take privately owned property for personal gain." Her voice cracked, "But I'm the president of the HOA. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." "Then you shouldn't have forged court documents," Mendes said. Karen's face went pale. I stepped forward and picked up my phone from the dirt, still recording everything. "You messed with the wrong veteran, Karen," I said quietly. The other board member began to cry. Within minutes, the officers had them all cuffed and escorted to the SUV. Mendes turned to me. "That was brave, risky, but effective. We've been waiting months for this kind of evidence." "Are you going after the developers too?" I asked. He nodded. "Now that we've got the HOA, we can trace the financials back to the development group. That Project Longridge deal is going to fall apart." I let out a long breath. I didn't realize I had been holding it for so long. But it wasn't over yet. Later that night, Dennis and I sat on the porch drinking sweet tea while Ruger lay at our feet. "You did it," he said. "They'll never come near your land again." But something still bugged me. "Dennis, what about the other ranchers? The ones who already gave up? The ones they bullied before me?" He sighed. "Some of them signed their land away under threats and lies. We can fight for them, but it'll be a long legal battle." I stared out into the darkness, thinking of the names on that list. One was a widow. Another was a disabled farmer with no children. They didn't have the means to fight back. They didn't have the cameras, a lawyer, or the time to dig through paperwork like I did. I want to help them, I said finally. Dennis smiled. Then we take this public. Let the media see it. Once this story breaks, people will come forward, and if enough of them do, we can start a class action lawsuit. So that's what we did. The next morning, I uploaded the full video of Karen's takedown. I blurred faces where I had to, but left the important parts visible. I titled it, "They Tried to Take My Ranch." Karen screamed, "Stop. You're making this worse for yourself." I fought back and won. It went viral within 2 hours. Over 1 million views by midnight. News reporters started calling. People from all over the country shared similar HOA horror stories. Some said they were fined for planting tomatoes. Others said they were evicted from their homes for painting their doors the wrong color. One woman from Florida said she had lost her family home because the HOA kept tacking on maintenance fees until she couldn't pay anymore. I realized something powerful was happening. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was a movement. I went on local news, then regional, then a national network picked up the story. They even showed a clip of Karen being arrested played right next to the title of Project Longbridge. The developers panicked. They tried to deny everything, but the FBI was already knee-deep in their bank records and email chains. And when they raided the Oak Hollow HOA office, they found even more documents proving they'd done this before in other states. This wasn't a one-time scam. It was a nationwide scheme. 1 week later, I received a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was another threat, but this one wasn't from the HOA. It was from a woman named Lisa Berman, whose family ranch had been seized 5 months ago. She wrote, "Jack, you don't know me, but I saw your video. I cried for an hour. I thought no one would ever fight back. You didn't just save your land. You gave the rest of us hope. Thank you." I folded the letter and placed it in a box where I keep the few things that truly matter. But just when I thought the dust had finally settled, my phone buzzed. It was Dennis. "Jack, we've got a new problem." "What now?" I asked. "The Oak Hollow HOA board may be dismantled, but the developers, they just filed a lawsuit claiming they own the mineral rights under your land. They want to drill." I stood there in silence. "You've got to be kidding me," I finally muttered. "They're playing dirty again, Jack," Dennis said. "This time they're trying to dig under you, literally." I clenched my jaw. I had won the battle, but the war, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And this time, they were about to learn what fighting dirty really meant. I should have celebrated, but the drone photo's coordinates led to a gravesite with my name on the marker. The sun hadn't even risen when I grabbed my keys, fed Ruger early, and drove straight to Dennis's office. I didn't even bother with coffee. My boots hit the floor like war drums. I pushed through the front door with the folder of HOA documents still in my hand. Dennis looked up from his laptop and shook his head. "They're relentless, Jack. They're desperate," I said. "They lost their inside team. Now they're digging for scraps." He turned the screen toward me. "Here's the lawsuit they filed. It claims that when the land was purchased years ago by the previous owner, mineral rights weren't included in the transfer. And now the developer, Hochland Property Group, is saying they purchased those rights from a shell company 3 months ago." I squinted at the screen. "Shell company?" "Yep. Registered offshore. 0 employees. Just a mailing address and bank account. And let me guess," I said, "someone from the HOA is tied to that bank account." Dennis nodded. "Working on proving that right now." I stood there fuming. "So, what's their endgame?" "Easy," Dennis said. "They want to drill beneath your ranch, claim oil or gas, and make millions while you deal with the noise, damage, and destruction. And if you resist, they'll sue you into the ground." I stared out the window. The wind was blowing the leaves on the sidewalk like nature knew a storm was coming. "I won't let them get 1 inch of my land. Not above, not below." "We'll have to move fast," he said. If they get temporary approval from a judge to begin surveying, they'll bring trucks. Big ones. That same afternoon, I called up someone I hadn't talked to in years. Then it's Jack. A pause. Jack Lawson. Holy hell, I thought you dropped off the planet. Not quite, I said. You still working with the Land Trust Network? Yeah. Why? Because someone's trying to dig under my land and I need backup. Ben laughed. Buddy, I'm on a plane tonight. Ben and I served together in the Marines. After leaving the service, he got into environmental law and started working with nonprofits that helped ranchers protect their land through conservation easements, basically legal handcuffs that stopped developers from exploiting rural land without consent. He arrived the next day in a beat-up Jeep, canvas satchel over his shoulder, and boots covered in Utah red dirt. He shook my hand. Let's make it impossible for them to ever touch your land again. Within 48 hours, we began filing paperwork to lock the ranch into a permanent conservation easement. That meant no commercial digging, no development, no pipelines, nothing. It would be a sanctuary for agriculture and wildlife forever. But the developers weren't backing down. That weekend, 3 white trucks with GeoServe printed on the sides pulled up on the road bordering my land. Men in orange vests stepped out and began drilling sample rods into the ground just outside my fence line. Ruger barked like mad. I walked up to the fence and waved. The lead guy nodded. Sorry, sir. Just collecting seismic data. All legal. Not if you cross that fence, I warned. You step foot on my soil, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. He gave me a tight smile. Don't worry, that comes next week. I didn't wait. That night, I stayed up reinforcing the perimeter, installing new warning signs, reflective markers, and extra floodlights. Ruger stayed by my side, tail twitching. Dennis called with an update. Their permit request just landed on a judge's desk. If it gets approved, they can send in surveyors next week. Then we need to move faster. Ben and I drafted a press release exposing the mineral rights trick. We posted it online with the headline, Developers Use Shell Companies to Seize Texas Land from Veterans. It caught fire. News outlets started calling again. People rallied behind the story. That same night, a local veterans group showed up on my land with signs and banners. One of them, a guy named Earl, who lost his leg in Afghanistan, raised a flag on my front pasture with a sign that read, "This land was fought for. It won't be taken." It was the proudest moment I'd had since coming back home. But just as the rally ended, my neighbor, Mr. Tucker, pulled up in his pickup, looking nervous. Jack, they were at my house, he said quietly. Who? A man in a suit. He asked me to testify that your property's been abandoned for years. Said I'd be rewarded if I cooperated. I clenched my fists. They're bribing neighbors now? He nodded. I told him to shove it and drove off, but others may not be so loyal. That's when I knew they were trying to stack the deck. If they couldn't beat me legally, they'd try to corrupt the court with false testimony. I met with Ben and Dennis that night under the stars. We need to strike hard, I said. Expose everything. Ben nodded. I've been holding back, but I've got friends in D.C. who owe me favors. Environmental protection agencies, veterans coalitions, journalists. I can make some calls. Do it, I said. Blow this whole thing open. 2 days later, a new headline rocked the front page of every Texas news site. Rancher battles illegal land grab by HOA-linked developers. Feds begin probe into mineral scam. The next morning, Hochland Property Group's offices were swarmed by investigators. Boxes of files were seized, laptops taken, phones confiscated. And it wasn't just them. The judge who had been reviewing their permit recused himself after it came to light that he'd received donations from a PAC run by one of Hochland's board members. Everything was crumbling, but the developers weren't finished yet. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. Jack Lawson. A deep voice asked, "Who's this? You've made powerful enemies. If I were you, I'd sign over that land and disappear." I stayed quiet. You've got 1 week. Click. Ruger growled from the corner. I stared at the phone and whispered, "You just made your last mistake." Because if they wanted war, I wasn't just going to defend anymore. I was going to attack. And the next move, it was going to shake the ground. They were so desperate to drill. They thought they were chasing a rancher, but they were running straight into a storm. I didn't sleep that night. Not 1 second. That threat over the phone wasn't just a scare tactic. It was a declaration of war. And I'd fought in real wars. I knew the signs. I knew how predators circled before they pounced. But I also knew how to bait them into a trap. By sunrise, I had a plan. Dennis, then, and I sat around my kitchen table. Ruger lay at our feet, alert, ears twitching with every sound. The air was thick with tension and black coffee. "I say we call the FBI again," Dennis said. "Record the call. Send them the number. Let the Bureau trace it." Ben shook his head. "They'll play it safe now. After that last raid, they'll be too careful to use phones registered to them. It'll lead to some dead-end burner." "Then we flip the game," I said. Dennis raised an eyebrow. "How?" "We let them think I'm caving, that I'm finally giving in. We leak a fake story that I'm selling my land quietly under pressure with a buyer already lined up." And leaned forward slowly. "And while they celebrate, we'll be watching." "Exactly," I said. "But not just watching, we'll catch them in the act. This time, I want the whole country to see it live." So I did it. I posted on my social media a carefully crafted video. It looked somber. I stood on the front porch of my ranch with the wind behind me and said, "I fought long and hard, but I've got to put my health and peace first. I'll be stepping away from the ranch soon. I thank everyone who stood by me. Please keep fighting where you are." People were heartbroken in the comments. Some angry, some supportive, but all of them watching. What the developers didn't know was that I had installed 3 hidden trail cameras. One behind the barn, another near the creek, and a third in a tree overlooking the back path that led to the property. 2 nights later, the rats came crawling. At exactly 2:38 a.m., a black SUV pulled up near the back fence, same kind from before. 4 men in dark clothes hopped out carrying bolt cutters, shovels, and flashlights. One had a folded document tube tucked under his arm. They thought the ranch was unwatched. They thought I had given up. But I was inside the barn with Ruger, watching every second through a live feed. And right next to me were 2 federal agents and a local news crew, cameras ready. When one of the men sliced through the back fence and stepped foot onto my land, Agent Mendes gave the signal. Lights, sirens, spotlights. FBI, hands up. Do not move. The 4 men froze like deer in headlights. One tried to run, but tripped on the uneven ground and rolled down a shallow ditch. Another dropped the tube and fell to his knees. The lead guy, the one holding the bolt cutters, just raised his hands and muttered, "We were told no one would be here." That's when I stepped out of the barn. Shotgun in one hand, flashlight in the other. You were told wrong. They were all arrested on the spot. The document tube contained forged land transfer forms, pre-signed, predated, with my forged signature and a fake notary stamp. They planned to claim I had sold the land and that I had already left town. It was fraud, grand larceny, trespassing, tampering with private property, and now federal crimes. The footage went viral within hours. News stations labeled it HOA-backed developers caught in midnight land theft attempt. Veteran rancher outsmarts them all. They played the clip of me walking out of the barn again and again. You were told wrong. That line became a meme. Veterans groups, ranchers, homeowners across the U.S. They all rallied online. People were sending donations to support the legal fund we launched to help other victims. A senator from Texas even invited me to speak at a town hall on rural land protection. But just when the dust was starting to settle, Ben came rushing into my house, laptop in hand. "Jack, you need to see this." It was a leaked email thread. Hockland Property Group executives had been exchanging messages about a backdoor buyout plan. They were going after county officials, offering community revitalization funds in exchange for new zoning laws that would bypass conservation easements. They're going to try to override everything we've done, Ben said. They're using political pressure to change the law. So even if I win this round, I muttered, they'll change the rules next time. Dennis sat down slowly. That's why we hit them where it hurts. Where's that? He looked me in the eye. Their wallet. It was risky, but it made sense. We filed a massive civil lawsuit, not just for me, but for every rancher, every homeowner who had been threatened, fined, manipulated, or tricked by HOA-linked schemes. With Ben's help, we turned it into a class action suit backed by over 200 claimants. Some had lost homes, others had lost farmland. All had stories, painful ones. The case was titled Lawson versus Hochland Property Group, Oak Hollow HOA, and Affiliates. But Hochland didn't fold. No, they struck back. 3 days before the court hearing, my ranch was vandalized. Red paint splattered across my barn with the words, "You're next." My fence posts were snapped. Someone poisoned the water trough. I caught it in time before Ruger or the cows drank from it. It wasn't just a legal war now. They were getting personal. Dennis, Ben, and Agent Mendes came to the ranch immediately. This is retaliation, Mendes said. And it's criminal. We need to move up the court date, Dennis added, before they escalate further. Ben looked at me grimly. You okay? I stared at the barn, the paint, the smashed fence. Then I turned to them and said, I've come too far to back down now. We cleaned up, rebuilt, patched the fence, replaced water tanks, and just when we thought that was the end of their stunts, a drone flew over my property the next morning twice. It circled low, hovered, then dropped something. I ran out and found a single envelope in the dirt. Inside was a photo of my ranch with a red X drawn across it. No message, no return address, just that silent, chilling image. It was a threat, a final warning. But instead of fear, I felt something else. Resolve. They wanted to scare me off the battlefield. But they didn't know. I built the battlefield. And in 3 days, we were walking into court. Not just to fight, but to finish this for good. The courthouse in downtown Austin was buzzing that Monday morning. Reporters clustered on the courthouse steps. News vans filled the street. Banners with phrases like "Protect Rural America" and "No to HOA Tyranny" flapped in the wind. I stepped out of Dennis's pickup truck in full view of the cameras, wearing my worn boots, a clean button-up shirt, and my father's old U.S. Army dog tags around my neck. Ruger wasn't allowed in court, but he rode with us for morale. I gave him a pat on the head before heading toward the doors. Ben walked beside me, holding a stack of evidence files, while Dennis adjusted his tie and muttered case law under his breath. This wasn't just a court hearing anymore. This was a reckoning. Inside the courtroom, Hochland's lawyers sat smugly in their tailored suits. Karen Whitmore was there, too, sitting stiffly behind the defense table. A different woman than the one who first tried to bring me into the community. Her eyes darted from me to the judge's bench without making contact. The judge was a no-nonsense woman named Honor Gloria Kent. She had a reputation for hating corruption and loving the law more than comfort. She adjusted her glasses, shuffled through the papers on her desk, and said, "Let's begin." Dennis was up first. He gave the jury a walkthrough of my story, the false fines, the fake documents, trespassing, the bribes, arrest of HOA members on my land, the late-night break-ins. He played the drone footage, then the midnight camera footage. He pulled out the Project Longbridge folder, the mineral rights scam, and the fake court notice Karen handed me personally. Then came the testimonies. Mr. Tucker took the stand and recounted the bribe they offered him. Lisa Berman cried on the stand as she shared how they stole her family's ranch using scare tactics and legal confusion. A tech expert from the FBI explained how shell companies were linked to Hochland's inner circle, how money moved from offshore accounts to local campaign donations, and how they exploited legal gray areas to force people off their land. Then it was my turn. I stood slowly, stepped into the witness box, and looked every juror in the eye. I served my country to protect land, freedom, and dignity, I began. When I bought my ranch, it wasn't just for peace and quiet. It was to build something honest, something lasting. I told them everything. The threat calls, the vandalism, the photo dropped from a drone. They didn't just try to take my land, I said. They tried to take hope from me and others like me. But I decided to fight back. And I'm not done. I left the stand with the courtroom silent. Then came the defense's turn. Their lawyer, slimy as a soaked weasel, stood and tried to spin the narrative. These were unfortunate misunderstandings, he said. Our clients had only the best intentions. They believed Mr. Lawson's land was within the HOA boundary. They acted to preserve the community. Judge Kent narrowed her eyes. Preserving the community with fake court documents? The defense lawyer stammered. Those were the actions of one or two individuals acting alone, Your Honor, not our entire organization. They tried to throw Karen under the bus. She looked stunned, clearly not expecting betrayal from her own side. But Dennis had been ready for that. He pulled out a thumb drive. Your Honor, he said, this is a voice recording of a strategy meeting held in Hochland's boardroom. You'll hear not only Karen, but all of the executives agreeing to the plan to force Mr. Lawson off his land by any means necessary. We watched as the audio filled the room. Karen's voice, board members laughing, planning, talking about me like I was nothing. One voice said, "It's just one old ranch. He'll fold like the rest." I watched the jury's expressions shift from shock to fury. The courtroom shook with quiet rage. When it was over, Judge Kent banged her gavel. Court will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments and a ruling. Outside, the press swarmed us again. I didn't say much, just one line. We're not backing down. That night, the developers made their final move. A fire. At 2:13 a.m., my barn went up in flames. By the time I raced outside with Ruger, the fire was already devouring the structure. The red roof caved in. Ash fell like snow. It wasn't just a barn. It held my tools, my history, the wood I'd cut with my dad, a handmade saddle from my grandpa. The saddle my dad carved smoldered in the ashes. That's when I stopped counting casualties and started planning vengeance. I stood barefoot in the dirt, watching it burn. Fire trucks arrived. They managed to keep it from spreading, but it was a total loss. Ben pulled up minutes later, looked at the smoldering mess, and muttered, "This is their desperation." Dennis arrived next, gripping a printed security cam screenshot. "We got him," he said. The fire had triggered the trail cams again. The same SUV from before, masked figures, same license plate partially visible in the smoke. One was caught holding a torch. The photo showed his wrist, and on it the expensive gold watch we'd seen in the courtroom on Hochland's regional director. The next morning in court, Dennis requested an emergency session and submitted the photo. Gasps filled the courtroom. Judge Kent looked at the photo, then at the jury. "I'll allow it," she said. The jury returned less than 4 hours later. The foreman stood. "We, the jury, find in favor of Jack Lawson and the plaintiffs. We award $7.2 million in damages for harassment, property destruction, fraud, and emotional distress." The courtroom erupted. Karen fainted. The Hochland execs sat stone-faced as the judge ordered a federal investigation into their business practices. Their accounts were frozen. The entire Oak Hollow HO was dismantled and placed under state supervision. I didn't cheer. I just breathed deep, quiet, steady. After months of war, I finally had a piece of peace. But it wasn't the end. Not yet. Because 2 days later, I got a letter. No return address, no threats, just a sentence. "This isn't over, Lawson." I looked out across my ranch. Burned barn, broken fences, yet still standing. I folded the letter, tucked it away, and whispered to myself, "Then neither am I." The sun rose slow and hazy over the ranch the next morning. Smoke still lingered in the air like a bitter memory, curling through the broken skeleton of my barn. The ashes were cold now, but the fire still burned in my chest. I stood at the fence with Ruger beside me, watching as a group of volunteers, veterans, farmers, neighbors, even strangers who'd seen my story online, arrived in pickups and flatbeds to help me rebuild. They came with tools, lumber, roofing tin, and strong arms. One man, a bearded Texan named Cole, walked up and handed me a fresh hammer. "Thought you could use this," he said. I took it slowly, nodding. "Thanks. You didn't just fight for your land, Jack. You fought for all of us. Now it's our turn." By noon, the new barn was already taking shape. The sound of hammers hitting nails was like music, like hope. But even in the middle of all that good, I couldn't shake the weight of that letter. "This isn't over, Lawson." It had no fingerprints, no camera footage of it being delivered, no return address. But it wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. One that meant someone still had plans. Dennis showed up that afternoon with coffee in hand and a look that said bad news again. "I checked with the feds," he said. "The man with the gold watch, he's talking, but someone above him is still clean, hidden behind layers of shell companies, and they're moving money fast." I sipped the coffee. How much time before they strike again? Could be weeks, could be tomorrow, but they're watching. Ben joined us by the tool bench, eyes narrowed at his phone. "They filed a motion in federal court this morning." My stomach twisted. "For what?" He turned the screen toward me. "To claim eminent domain. They're saying your land is vital for state-approved water pipeline construction, and they're petitioning to take it." I laughed bitterly. After all this, they want to legally take it under state seizure. "It's their last card," Dennis said. "They're using public interest laws to override conservation status. If they win, they can take the land, pay you pennies, and bulldoze everything." "No," I said firmly. "Not happening." Ben pulled out a new folder. "So, here's the plan. We counterfile immediately. We drag every dollar they've hidden into the light, and we go public again. This time louder. National stage. Senate hearings, veteran rights forums, rural land coalitions. This story will go so wide they'll have to run for cover." And we did exactly that. That week I went to Washington, D.C., invited by a senator from Texas who'd heard about the case. I sat in a suit in front of a long panel of lawmakers and told them everything. I played the video of the arrests. I told them about the drone, the barn fire, late-night threats, the forged mineral rights, and the final push to claim my land as state property. "This isn't just about a ranch in Texas," I said into the microphone. "This is about what happens when good land falls into the sights of greedy men who believe money is stronger than the law." I didn't fight for this country to watch it be bought piece by corporations hiding behind HOAs and shell companies. The room was quiet. Then a senator from Ohio leaned in and said, "Mr. Lawson, we believe it's time for a national audit of how HOAs and developers are using public interest laws to steal from private citizens." Applause broke out behind me. 2 days later, a federal injunction froze all Hochland projects across 3 states. Their CEO resigned. Karen Whitmore accepted a plea deal in exchange for turning over internal documents. And that mysterious offshore company, it was exposed in a global leak tied to 10 other fraudulent land seizure cases. Half a dozen executives were indicted. Back home, the ranch thrived again. The new barn stood strong. The community planted wildflowers where the fire once burned. Ruger got a brand new collar with a brass tag that read, "Defender of the Ranch." The local school started calling me Mr. Jack the Fighter, and I was invited to speak at graduation that spring, but I never forgot the letter or the weight of what it meant. So I built a safe buried under the flagpole. Inside it, I placed a hard drive with all my video evidence, copies of every court document, a letter addressed to the future owner of the ranch titled, "If They Ever Come Again." Because I knew this story wasn't just mine. It was ours. A battle for dignity, a stand for freedom, and a warning that home is worth fighting for. Now every morning when I walk the fence line, I run my fingers along the new wood. Feel the strength in every post and whisper the same words I said the day the barn burned down. You can come for the land, but I'll still be standing. If your HOA's crossed a line, comment their worst violation below. We'll expose them together, and I'll fight the top voted story next week. But the letter in my safe? It wasn't from the HOA. The FBI stamp changed everything. Where are you watching this from? Did this story fire you up, too? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to follow for more true battle for the land stories just like this one.